I think the potential threat to this whistleblower's life is a realistic concern. And if I were the whistleblower or anyone else the whistleblower talked to, I think it would be a rational conclusion to say you may be in jeopardy.
Well, that was the Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, yesterday, expressing concern for the whistleblower's safety in the face of attacks by the president. And as we mentioned, the Intelligence Community Inspector General's office released a statement to say the whistleblower stated on the form that he or she possessed both firsthand and other information. That counters the president's efforts to discredit the whistleblower as someone who was not informed. I want to bring in Mike Allen. He joins me now. He was a special assistant to President George W. Bush at the National Security Council and also a former staff director for the House Select Committee on Intelligence. He now serves as managing director for Beacon Strategy. So, Michael, you know a great deal about intelligence. The president today posed this question. He said, why aren't we entitled to interview and learn everything about the whistleblower and also the person who gave all of the what he calls false information to him? So as someone who knows intelligence, gets it, what would your answer be to the president's question?
Well, we've set up whistleblower statutes in this country so that we have someone deep in the bureaucracy, so they might have a channel to report waste, fraud, abuse, or misconduct. And so we want to protect these people to incentivize them to come forward. Chuck Grassley, who you mentioned in your previous segment, the senator from Iowa, has been one of the biggest champions of whistleblowers that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 decades. And so we want to protect these people. And so it's just probably not appropriate for the president and for the White House to then be in a position where they can cross-examine this individual. I think that's fair that this individual has to testify or otherwise give testimony behind closed doors up in the Congress, so that then in that setting there can be sort of a cross-examination. But it's not the way our system is set up that the president can try and bully or otherwise cross-examine a whistleblower.
And as you mentioned, the House Intelligence Committee is working to speak with this whistleblower. What do you think it is that they could get from this whistleblower that could be helpful for them?
Context. I think this individual has to be able to describe what was firsthand knowledge, what was secondhand knowledge, and also, are there any other circumstances that bear on what happened in this particular case? It's a very serious charge if the President of the United States is trying to condition foreign assistance on domestic political help. And so we need to know what this individual has to say that's not reflected in the filed complaint.
What do you think the Republican strategy might be when talking and discussing with the whistleblower in private?
I think that they will try, one, to figure out whether there is indeed any political bias. I found it curious and a little bit worrisome that that was in the whistleblower complaint. I would want to know and get to the bottom of that in particular. But in general, I think the playbook on the Hill is, frankly, for most hearings and certainly for impeachment proceedings, it's to go after the witnesses that are hostile to your own position. I think the Republicans are trying to find the right message. They're certainly attacking the whistleblower, and particularly the president on his Twitter feed, are trying to find out what message will stick so that they can sort of rally not only their base, but also appeal to independents on the grounds that, hey, you know what, this is too much of a remedy in search of a problem.
When you learned that the Attorney General had actually asked foreign involvement, foreign help, looking into the CIA and the FBI's role in the Russia probe, did you think that was weird, unusual?
Well, it depends on what you think of the Durham probe. I think you're following it as well. This is where the Attorney General has asked a very respected U.S. attorney in Connecticut who has a history of doing very sensitive investigations of the intelligence community. I myself do have some questions about the role of Fusion, GPS, and the Justice Department. I think those are legitimate questions to ask. I don't think it would have been a good idea to put it in the hands of some blatant partisan. I'm glad it's in the hands of Durham. So I kind of think it's okay if Barr simply said, hey, you know what, we hope you cooperate. But if Barr seemed to put undue pressure on or otherwise rebuke our allies for playing a role, that goes too far. So I think we've got to get to the bottom of and find the context in which Barr weighed in on behalf of this probe.
And if that is in fact true, that there was undue pressure placed by Barr, could there be consequences for him? And if so, what could that be?
Well, I think the consequences and the remedies, of course, that the Congress would have would be first to get Barr up to the Hill, try and get this testimony on record. And certainly it could get to the point where you want to censure the Attorney General if he went too far. Now, we're a long way from that.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that Barr probably just said, hey, we hope you cooperate. It's important to the president. To me, that's kind of okay because of whose hands the investigation has been placed in. But these are questions that I think have got to be answered over time. And I'm not sure the administration really wants to send, they certainly don't want to send Pompeo to the Hill. I'm not sure they want to send Barr either to get on the record.
I want to play for you. You know, so much of this is figuring out what's political and what is legitimately down legal lines here. I want to play a little bit of what former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had to say about the reports that Mike Pompeo was on the call.
Well, the Secretary of State's job is to make sure that he knows, number one, what the president's going to say on those calls. I mean, these are usually very highly prepared calls. And, you know, State Department and Defense Department, everybody will send over, you know, talking points.
Sure.
And, you know, we'll meet with the president and go over the talking points. And the president might say, well, you know, I'd rather emphasize this or what about that? Fair game, absolutely. And because you've got a president who doesn't listen to anybody and doesn't follow instructions whatsoever, I'm not sure they've even given up on trying to give him any sorts of preparation because they don't know what he's going to say. I think if the Secretary of State was on the call, as is now being reported, he should have been one of the very first people to, you know, just say, wait a minute, we got to clean this up. You can't let that stand. But we don't know what he did.
Do you agree with her assessment, Michael?
Yeah, and it may be the case that Secretary Pompeo did act to clean this up because not long after the call, the money was unfrozen. You remember the $280 million that Congress had appropriated to Ukraine to help them with their military struggle against the Russians who are sort of impeding upon their country. It may have been the case that Secretary Pompeo saw this and said, well, we've really got to free up this funds. But that's the reason we have to go through a process in impeachment and otherwise, and for the oversight committees. There are a lot of facts. I can tell you, having been staff director of the same committee, House Intelligence, rarely these investigations go in a straight line. So there are a lot of questions to answer, and we ought not go too fast on impeachment proceedings because this is like the most serious remedy that the Constitution provides, and we need to sort of proceed with deliberate speed.
Michael Allen, thank you very much, Michael, for joining us.
Thanks, Rena.